Hello everyone, this video covers problems 11 to 15 from Think Through Geometry. If you haven't purchased the book yet, I've included the URL in the description of this YouTube video. Problem number 11. Angles A and B are complementary. So what do you know about the complementary angles? Complementary angle means that we have the sum being 90. So the measure of A equals 15. And we have no idea what measure of B is, but apparently we need to find out what that is. Now, according to the given condition, it means that we have measure of A plus measure of B being 90. So we substitute 15 out there, and we also substitute x down there to call it 90. So apparently x becomes 90 minus 15 using the translation property. And I got to say that 75 would be the answer for our problem. Okay, so problem number 12. If angles C and D are supplementary, where the measure of C equals 25, determine the exact value of the measure of angle D in degree measures. Okay, so measure of C. First, that becomes 25. We don't know what measure of D is, so please label it as X. And all we have to do is just to translate or paraphrase angles C and D being supplementary. So measure of C plus measure of D being 180, because that's the definition of supplementary angle pairs. So instead of measure of C, you substitute 25. And instead of measure of D, you substitute X. And we get 180. Of course, for abbreviating the notations, we get rid of that circle mark out there. And x becomes 180 minus 25, and that becomes 155. Of course, in degree measures, the answer becomes 155 degrees. So my answer would be 155 for problem number 12. Okay, so let's go on to problem number 13. If angles E and F form a linear pair, where the measure of E equals 15, determine the measure of F in degrees. Okay, so measure of E plus measure of F becomes 180, and at the same time they are adjacent. That's the definition of a linear pair. Okay, so we understood that the given info tells us that the measure of E equals 15. So we substitute 15 instead of measure of E, and we get measure of F. Unlike the previous two problems, I kind of abbreviated the whole process by getting rid of those x's. And I think that measure of F just stands out for a good unknown variable. So we get 180 out there, and measure of F becomes 180 minus 15. And if you subtract these two values, then the given answer would be 165. There we go. Okay, so two more problems. All right, so number 14. Let's underline the vertical angles. So what are the vertical angles? Some of you might have heard about the vertical angle postulates, or others might not have heard about it. The vertical angles are usually congruent according to the VAP. We usually call it VAP, right? So we have angles that look at each other from the vertex. These are called the vertical angles. So if I call this A and B, then the measure of A apparently equals measure of B according to VAP, the vertical angle postulate. So measure of A equals 10 though. So the measure of B apparently becomes 10 as well by translation property, or you can call this as a transitive property or substitution property. Yes, so the answer becomes 10. All right, so let's move on to number 15. Well, this indicates a triangle. So I usually call it as a sum of interior angles of triangle theorem. And you can also prove that the measures of the sum of all interior angle measures of a triangle becomes 180. But apparently we just have to set up. We just need to set up certain equations. So we get measure of A out there. Of course, there's a notational, like there's some kind of notational mistakes. You can actually fix that. These are measure of A and measure of B. So we got measure of A plus measure of B plus measure of C equals 180. And just for convenience, I call it SIAT theorem. And SIAT theorem stands out for sum of interior angles of a triangle theorem. So let's just try to substitute the given values. And we have no idea what measure of C is yet, but I think we can just use the substitution property. of measure of A and measure of B into that corresponding values, and measure of C becomes 180 minus 30 minus 60 using the translation property. That becomes 180 minus 90. And of course, we can express this as a 90.